Let's take this up now with the Professor Nikolai Petrovsky, who's the Director of Endocrinology at Flinders University in South Australia. Thanks for joining us, Professor. First of all, are you confident at all that the World Health Organization would have been provided all the information and data it required to make any clear findings on this investigation?
Look, I think we have to appreciate that, they have a terms of reference which is quite narrow. They only had a limited amount of time in China, and that, their itinerary was clearly had to be agreed by the Chinese government. And similarly, their access was restricted to what the Chinese government felt that they should see. So I think we have to be fair and put it in context that, they may not have had unlimited access to all of the material they may have liked to have seen, and we need to hear that from them, when they come back, I guess. Was there anything that they asked for that they didn't receive?
Given what we know about this coronavirus and other similar viruses, and given what we know about how this outbreak began in Wuhan, was closed down there and spread around the world, how likely is this frozen food theory that it could have come into the area, even from overseas, with frozen food?
Look, yes, I mean, scientifically, there is evidence that viruses can survive on refrigerated or frozen food. That's not novel. But really, if you dig down and say, what is the evidence that, this virus has been transmitted on food, even since the pandemic has started, then really the evidence is only been found in China. It hasn't been reported by other countries. And in fact, all of those reports have been in the Chinese media, not in Chinese scientific papers. So we really don't have access to the data on which they're making these claims. It hasn't been scientifically published and verified. So I think we have to be very cautious about it. And obviously, if this was a major concern, you could ask, why hasn't Australia similarly had outbreaks traceable to frozen food or refrigerated food, which we're importing from many other countries around the world? So
exactly.
I think the science is, again, the science of this is not strong. And I was very surprised that the WHO panel were making such an emphasis on it, given that there really is very little scientific data published on this question.
Spot on. Now, the origins of this virus are very important because I think you've been saying that if we know it's arisen naturally from animals, that would be of more concern, because we know that this could happen more often in more places any time. If it happened to escape from some work being undertaken in laboratories, that would actually be reassuring to us.
Yeah, so that's the paradox, is that you would hope that, if humans had some part to play in this and had seen the consequences, they certainly wouldn't be, embarking on similar work again. Whereas if this is out there in wild animal populations, then, almost certainly it's going to cross back over into humans. And, we see that with MERS coronavirus, because it's out in the camel populations and bat populations. We see outbreaks every 6 months or so crossing over from animals back into humans. So if it is in the animal population, it is a much bigger concern, because we're going to see more of this in the future for certain.
So, Professor Petrovsky, last year we spoke to you and you said there were certain characteristics about the infectiousness of this virus that tended to suggest it could have been through a laboratory process, that it might not have crossed naturally from animals. What more evidence, data around the world do we have to guide us on those sorts of prognostications?
So certainly, our original findings, which were very serendipitous, because we weren't looking for the origins of the virus at the time, but we found that the virus was incredibly well adapted to infect humans, specifically humans more than any other species, such as bats. And that's since been confirmed by many other scientists around the world. So no one now disagrees with our finding that, coronavirus, this particular coronavirus is best at infecting humans. And it was so from December 2019. And that's a very unusual feature of a recent crossover from animals to humans, where you would expect that it would actually be better adapted to infect the animals than the new human host. So that was our original finding. We obviously had no preconceived idea what that might mean, other than, it doesn't fit with a normal pandemic virus. And then subsequently, other scientists identified, features in the sequence, so that in the genetics of the virus, that again were somewhat unusual and couldn't be easily explained. It had pieces of DNA that, could potentially have been spliced in artificially, but could also, of course, have come from a natural event. And also, if you look at the balance of the genetic code inside the virus, there's some very unusual features which are quite rare in related coronaviruses in nature. So all of those features independently, raise the question, how did this virus come about? And we still don't have an explanation. So we really have to look everywhere. And I don't think we can easily dismiss the possibility that, there was some form of human intervention in this. We can't just assume that it came directly from an animal.
So given all we know, all that scientific background you've just been through, given we know that the Wuhan Institute of Virology has closed down databases that were previously open to scientists, and given we're waiting to see the detail of the WHO report, do you still believe that that institute should be the prime focus, or a prime focus of any investigations? Is that one of the most likely sources of this virus?
Look, I think we have to be careful and not point fingers. When we talk about features of the virus that, could reflect some form of human intervention, we're not saying where or how this could have happened. So I think that's for others to really comment on. Obviously, the fact that the outbreak seemed to start, in Wuhan, near a number of different institutes who were doing research on these types of coronaviruses, of course, always, is circumstantial. But, I guess, why didn't it arise, in Sydney, for instance, or somewhere else? So it does have to be explained, but I don't think we should point the fingers specifically at any one institute. As I say, that is more of an investigation issue than a scientific issue. If there was human intervention, where did that occur? We can't answer that question.
Wouldn't we love to? Thanks so much for joining us, Professor. I appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
Professor Nikolai Petrovsky there from Flinders University. Fascinating insight, isn't it? That the scientific evidence still points to some sort of human interference in the creation of this virus. And it arose in Wuhan, where we have the Wuhan Institute of Virology that we know from publicly available information was working on the most similar virus, which had come from bats in Yunnan province in 2015. You've got to put two and two together here and say that the WHO is talking about is basically singing from the Beijing song sheet at this stage.